Dusty Rhodes gave many things to the wrestling industry. War games, Cody and Dustin, that time somebody had a bicycle. But the most famous innovation to bear his name, literally, is the Dusty Finish. Devised by the American Dream during his time in the NWA, the Dusty Finish is when a wrestler, usually a babyface in a big title match, thinks they've won, only to have the decision reversed on a technicality to award the match to the baddie instead. This was done back in the day to trick fans into thinking their heroes had won without any need to change the belt. A feel-good moment for a fleeting moment. So let's celebrate the mad genius by recounting some of the greatest times his beloved innovation was utilized. If you will, I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best Dusty finishes in wrestling history. Join us! Number 10, the Hart Foundation versus the British Bulldogs on Saturday night's main event. Whilst most Dusty finishes are used in big singles title matches, tag teams have also been allowed in on the fun over the years. Take this marquee match from the 11th edition of Saturday night's main event, which aired on May 2nd, 1987. The British Bulldogs were competing in a World Tag Team Championship match against the duo that had taken those belts from them earlier that year, the villainous Hart Foundation. The match took place under 2 out of 3 falls rules, meaning that Dynamite and Davey Boy would have to beat the Hitman and the Anvil twice in order to win back the gold. Whilst they were successful in doing so, it came at a cost. Bret and Jim were disqualified during the first fall for illegal double teaming, which technically gave the Bulldogs a point. However, after Dynamite Kid pinned Neidhart for the second fall, it was decided that the match should have been thrown out for the earlier foul, cruelly denying the good guys their big win. Fans thought that those no-good Hearts had finally gotten their just desserts, but on this night, it wasn't meant to be. Number 9, Ric Flair vs Tatsuji Fujinami at WCW/New Japan's Super Show 1991. What do you do when you book yourself into a double championship match but don't want your guy to drop both of his belts? Well, you probably don't book the match in the first place, but this was the next best thing, I guess. In the main event of the first ever WCW/New Japan Super Show, which took place in the Tokyo Dome in early 1991, joint NWA and WCW champion Ric Flair was putting both of his titles on the line against IWGP Heavyweight champion Tatsumi Fujinami. This blockbuster showdown ended with the Dragon defeating the Nature Boy to capture all of the gold. Well, 2/3 of it anyway. Earlier in the match, the Japanese star had flung Flair over the top rope. In kayfabe, this was an illegal move as per WCW's rules, so whilst Fujinami became the newly recognised NWA champ, the other promotion refused to acknowledge the swap. This was likely done to aid the ongoing split between the NWA and WCW, so they could get the £10 of gold off Flair whilst he kept hold of the newly minted belt. A fine match, and each promotion got what they wanted. Everybody wins. Number 8, Seth Rollins vs Dean Ambrose at Elimination Chamber 2015. Whilst the Dusty Finish is usually thought of as an old-school technique, more modern examples of it do exist. Take this battle of the ex-Shield members from 2015, as Dean Ambrose stepped up to challenge Seth Rollins for the WWE Championship. After a great back-and-forth contest, Ambrose finally pinned the cocky heel champ to unseat him, resulting in rapturous applause from the crowd. However, fate was not in the lunatic Fringe's corner on this night, as the long arm of the law intervened to crush his dreams. Right before the pinfall, Ambrose had gone to hit Rollins with an elbow drop, only for the dastardly baddie to pull the referee into its path. A second official ran down to count the pin, only for the first ref to reverse the decision, disqualifying Rollins for putting his hands on him. Ambrose was still the winner, but Seth got to keep his title, and one of the greatest reaction faces in wrestling history was born too. It doesn't get much more classic than this, but it had been so long since WWE used this finish that it was highly effective. Number 7, CM Punk vs John Cena at Night of Champions 2012. CM Punk's mammoth WWE title run from late 2011 to early 2013 featured a few screwy finishes. Take his match with Daniel Bryan at Over the Limit 2012. The defending champ technically tapped out to the yes lock, but he did so whilst pinning his opponent, which got him the win. Bryan handled it in a mature and professional way, and definitely didn't go completely bonkers afterwards. However, However, for a true dusty finish, we have to look at this match with John Cena from Night of Champions later that same year. It looked like Big Match John had finally defeated his great foe when he pinned Punk off a top rope German suplex. Cena rejoiced at his apparent victory, celebrating in front of his hometown Boston crowd when the ref let him know that he'd apparently just made a giant tit of himself. Both men's shoulders had been down for the pin, meaning that the match had technically ended in a draw. As a result, Punk kept the title and the gargantuan reign rolled on. Number 6, Triple H vs Shawn Michaels on Raw. Speaking of world title matches ending in a draw, that is what happened when Shawn Michaels took on World Heavyweight Champion Triple H in a last man standing match at Royal Rumble 2004. Since draws are built into that match's mechanics, we've decided not to include it, but we can talk about a different bout featuring the same competitors from about a month earlier. On the final Raw of 2003, HBK and the Game squared off for the top prize in San Antonio, Texas, hometown of the showstopper. WWE could have given the returning hero a big win here in front of his loyal fans, but that would have made people happy, so they decided against it. Michaels did pin Hunter after Sweet Chin music, but Raw General Manager Eric Bischoff decreed that both men's shoulders had been down. Eazy-E had taken referee Earl Hebner's place after Triple H had KO'd him earlier in the match and used his heel authority to keep the title around the waist of the Evil Evolution leader. A ref bump, a heel referee, and a double pin? This is like a dusty finish on steroids. Number 5, Bob Backland vs Antonio Inoki in Japan. Back in the territory days, when wrestling was not the nationally broadcast juggernaut it would go on to become, promoters would book phantom title changes all the time, letting local babyfaces get the win, only to then find some way of reversing the decision. Perhaps the most notorious example of this happened on a Federation tour of Japan, where champion Bob Backland put his prize on the line against one of the all-time greats, Antonio Inoki. The founder of New Japan actually beat Backland for the gold on November 30th, becoming the first Japanese man in history to hold the prestigious prize. However, just a week later, everything would change. Backland beat Inoki in a rematch on December 6th, but this contest was declared null and void by kayfabe company president Hisashi Shinma as heel wrestler Tiger Jeet Singh had run interference. The title was awarded back to Inoki, but the noble babyface refused to take it under such circumstances. The championship was held up as vacant, with Backland winning it back in a separate match shortly thereafter. Inoki's reign has never actually been officially recognised, with Backland's 2 reigns being smooshed together. Number 4, Bret Hart vs Owen Hart on Superstars. Owen Hart often ends up in people's lists of best wrestlers to never win a world championship. And we should know, right? As it turns out, he shouldn't be on anybody's countdown because the Rocket technically did win the top title in 1994. During a set of tapings for episodes of Superstars, Owen faced his brother Bret in a rematch of their classic opener from WrestleMania 10. The match was fought under lumberjack rules, which allowed for Jim Neidhart to get involved on Owen's behalf, clocking the Hitman to give his younger sibling the 1, 2, 3. Whilst Owen and the heels celebrated, the babyface Lumberjacks managed to convince the referee that Anvil had cheated, causing the decision to get overturned. Rumour has it that Vince McMahon booked this to gauge crowd reaction to an Owen title win. The younger Harts were scheduled to face Bret again at SummerSlam for the belt, and if the response was strong enough, he would walk out as champ. Sadly, this didn't happen, and the Black Heart never got a world title to add to his 2 Slammies. Number 3, Ric Flair vs Lex Luger at the Great American Bash 1988. For this very special example of the dusty finish, we need to talk about one of the most mysterious and infamous characters in all of pro wrestling history, the State Athletic Commission. The Great American Bash 1988 was supposed to be Lex Luger's big coming out party as the next NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. He had recently stepped out of the Four Horsemen's shadow to become a very popular babyface, and everyone expected him to beat Ric Flair in the main event and take the gold away from him. Well, one of those things happened. After a hard-fought scrap, Luger hoisted the champion up for the torture rack, submitting Flair to win the gold in front of thousands of fans. Unfortunately, the match had been so hard-fought that Luger was bleeding like the end scene of Carrie, which the Maryland Athletic Commission were not happy about. The commission, which was totally real and not made up, had ruled that Luger had bled too much and that the match should have been stopped before he scored the win. Thus, no title change. Number 2, Triple H vs Chris Jericho on Raw. In the 21st century, there has been no better example of a Dusty finish than this one. Granted, it's only just inside the 21st century, but still. To imitate his hero Ric Flair, who himself had a rivalry with NWA referee Tommy Young, Triple H had butted heads with Earl Hebner, continuously drawing the ire of the veteran official. This all led to this match on Raw, a world title defense against Chris Jericho, where Hebner got his revenge on the Cerebral Assassin. After getting in his face for most of the match, Trips suffered Earl's wrath when he fast countered a Jericho pin to give Y2J the upset win. The pop for this change was huge, as Jericho was a young up-and-comer that nobody expected to win. And sadly, in the official history books, he didn't. The game used his clout to threaten Hebner into reversing the decision, handing him back the title and cancelling Jericho's reign. Still, for a brief moment, the all-conquering bad guy had been humbled by a relative newcomer from WCW and a middle-aged referee. God bless you, Earl Hebner. Number 1, Ric Flair vs. Dusty Rhodes at Starrcade 1985. For the number 1 spot on this list, there was nothing else we could do but award it to the match that essentially birthed the Dusty finish as a mainstream wrestling concept. Starrcade 1985, the biggest main event of the biggest show of the year. Ric Flair, flashy, elitist NWA champion, taking on the beacon of hope for the everyman, the American dream, Dusty Rhodes. This was Dusty's chance to win the big one for the average fella, a victory for the 9-to-5 blue-collar hustle over the private jets and fancy clothes, a chance for the ultimate feel-good result of the year. Did this happen? You know it didn't. Rhodes did beat Flair, yes, but only after the original referee had been taken out. This led to interference from Arn and Ole Anderson, which Rhodes overcame but would come back to bite him in his backside. The original referee decided that the match should be thrown out as a result of the Andersons' involvement, which contradicted the second official's call that Dusty had won the belt. So there you have it, Flair was still the champion, the American dream had been robbed, and from this moment on, Dusty's name would forever be associated with this sort of match ending.